This is a unique museum because it tells the story of Britain through the lens of faith, and we cover 6,000 and more years right up to the present day.
Bishop Auckland sits right in the centre of County Durham, so it's a really significant place. You can get up to the Dales really quickly, you're not that far away from the coastal plain, you're near to Durham City as well, you're relatively similar distance from the Tyne and the Tees. Before Bishop Auckland is a really important medieval hub, one of the principal sites for the Bishops of Durham. It's a really significant Roman site.
The museum isn't just about Christianity, although Auckland Castle was a Christian establishment.
What we've tried to do is to bring in the other faiths whenever we can.
I think there's a great advantage in creating a faith museum today, because the one thing that we all understand is that the world is a much wider place than Bishop Auckland or Britain or Christianity.
It allows us to have a museum which looks at this really complicated, personal, communal, thorny, wonderful, difficult subject of faith.
The museum was planned as an essential piece of the Auckland project, so something that would complement the castle and that came from the same spirit as Zurbarán's paintings of Jacob and his 12 sons. So something that continued that sort of faith story that began with the bishops and continues in sites like the Spanish Gallery, the Mining Art Gallery. So it was to add an extra layer to that and to give some context as well for why the castle is here at all.
This is probably one of the most sensitive historic environments in the country, with this extraordinary, probably 1,000-year history that has to be fully understood. You had to really think about how a new building could justify itself in relation to an understanding of how that site had developed over time.
What is striking about this building is that nothing had been built since 1795. I think a dumbwaiter was put in 1938, but that was the only accretion to a building that goes back nearly 1,000 years.
You start the exhibition through the Faith Museum in the existing Scotland wing, and you move through that narrow, tight exhibition space to a series of enfilade galleries on the ground floor of the new extension. Following that, you're on the first floor where we have the most southern gallery that has a picture window that looks out across the walled garden and the parkland beyond. And then after that you have the principal gallery space, which is being used to house temporary installations. That leads back into the existing Scotland wing on the first floor.
I was looking for that it feels both very modern and very primitive at the same time. So I wanted to overstep all of those specific bits of contextuality and make something that could be very ancient or could be very new, and you couldn't quite work out which of the two it was.
The stone is Copcrag sandstone, which is quarried near to the site in Otterburn in Northumberland. It has this fantastic variation in it, and actually the stone subcontractors were very nervous about this because they assumed that we'd approve this stone on the basis of a single sample, and I think they were of the impression that we weren't aware that it was going to have so much variation in it. But actually it's something that we really enjoy, particularly because it's such a large expanse of stone, and this gives it the interest that it kind of needs.
It's one of the most exciting buildings that has been created in the 21st century, and yet it still has the character of a tithe barn. That's what it was based on.
One of the things I wanted to do was to say that the gable should be emblematic and should have a sense that it's talking about a faith museum. And we looked at a number of buildings around the world that are all sacred buildings, and in each one of them, and I think this is a kind of a miracle of human culture, in each one of them, from Japan to the west of Ireland, in societies that had no contact with each other, they used the crossing of the rafter poles at the gable as a representation of the divinity.
Choosing the objects that we have for the Faith Museum has been a really interesting but difficult challenge. What we've tried to do is balance sharing things of the past with people, so showing them wonderful objects, telling them a little bit about the ways that we understand as archaeologists or historians, the ways that people practiced their faith in the past. We tried to balance that alongside asking questions as well as answering them.
We think about 3 questions. They are, am I alone? How do I live? Where do I belong? And those become underlying themes that are hinted at throughout the rest of the displays, but that re-emerge fully in Gallery 4 when we've asked the artists who are displaying their work there to respond to those 4 questions.
We were looking for objects that were witnesses to faith, so not so much religious artifact, but things where we could say, this tells us about the faith of the people who made them. So we were particularly looking for things that perhaps had personal stories attached. About 2/3 of what you see in the museum is through loans, and those loans might come from other museums. We've had a very generous response from museums all over Britain, including big nationals like the British Museum, the Victoria and Albert Museum, National Museums of Scotland and Wales. We have gradually acquired more things to add to the museum. Some of the objects we've actually gone out to auction sales and bought things, but then some of the things that we put in the museum actually we just find. We find them in the ground. We have an archaeology program that is enabling us to discover new things that we can show in the museum.
With the archaeological objects that we've got, we could have picked lots and lots of different ones, but the ones we've chosen are some of the most fantastic, but they also work really well together to tell you a story of faith expressed here in Bishop Auckland.
We've hunted far and wide for the things that you see in the museum. The other source of objects, of course, is living artists. Upstairs, you won't hear the curator's voice very loudly at all. The voice that you will hear is the voice of the artist, explaining their work, why they've made it, what does it respond to, whether it responds to their own faith or the faith of other people around them. And that means that we have room for a whole variety of different beliefs, religious beliefs, but also more vague spiritual beliefs that people might be holding in Britain today.
Faith and the questioning of that faith is something that I and many other people wrestle with. You know, I'm quite thrilled to be in this context. It's kind of quite a spine-tingling collection of artifacts that they have here, that there's a testament to people's belief.
I'm so delighted to have the work here in the Faith Museum at the Auckland Project, because sometimes I've had to be quite obscure and oblique about references to my faith because it hasn't always hit the mark. Some people find it uncomfortable, but here I can be very explicit and very open about the inspiration behind this work, and it feels like the perfect place for it to be.
The actual putting things into the galleries, that's a 2-stage process, because the first stage you have is the fit out, and that's it's like a kitchen fit out. You have carpenters putting in cabinets, we have beautiful glass cases, all made in Yorkshire, and then you have all the sort of plumbing, electrical side of things. So there are an awful lot of contractors who are here, all having to work very carefully to fit around each other. It's a very, very complex process that again has to be very professionally and expertly managed by our registrars and our collections team.
It was really lovely to see the museum come to life. We'd walked through this empty space for so long, and then it started having the objects coming in, and it started coming to life and taking on a life of its own. Because until that moment, you see designs on paper, and you never quite know whether it's all going to come together, whether those colours you think are going to work when you put the objects in front of it, whether they will work or not. So that was a really lovely thing.
The objects have gone in, we've locked the cases, we've fine-tuned all the electric stuff, all the digital things, and then we start to bring in the volunteers, and that's the most exciting bit. They are, as it were, the first visitors. It was so exciting to see their reaction. Then there's another group of people that we need to bring round, and those are all the people that we need to thank. So many people have had a part in this.
when we were finally able to open the Faith Museum after all its many years of gestation, it was so lovely for us to hear the responses of people coming through the doors.
I've just walked through a corridor with artefacts that are extraordinary. The fact that it's completely unique, probably in the world, and certainly in the UK, a museum dedicated to faith in all its different forms, and the history of faith, particularly in this place, and what it has meant to people here.
This is quite the spectacular building. It's yet another opportunity for the Auckland project to show that they can deliver really high quality architecture. Bishop Auckland is quickly gathering lots of new opportunities to come and explore its townscape and its sense of place. And the Faith Museum building is now one of the definite anchors in the architectural canon of the town, and it's going to be a real attractor to bring people here.
To be able to leave something, to be able to have made a positive impact on Bishop Auckland and its community and the wider County Durham area. And now that we're having visitors coming through, we're seeing people's response. I'm beginning to realise that yes, this really is going to make a difference. We can see 10 years into the Auckland project that it is making a difference.
It's made me ask deep questions, listen to other people's stories, think really hard about faith as a concept and faith individually for me.
We don't want them to go to the museum and never ever think about faith again. We hope that we have maybe put some ideas in their minds that they continue to reflect on, that perhaps they wonder about the experiences, the people, the rituals, be they religious or otherwise, that have shaped their own lives, and they continue to reflect on them, and that perhaps they feel more comfortable thinking and talking about faith.
I think that's something that's very nice about this building, that it's speaking to the specifics of different kinds of faith, but at the same time pointing out to us that in an increasingly secular age, that faith has been part of all of our histories, wherever we're from. And it seems to me that that's the really interesting thing about the idea of this Faith Museum.
I have one ambition in life. What's the purpose of me? The purpose of me is that I want to see people become the best thing they can possibly be. Now, who knows, other than oneself, what that thing is? So to me, if the Faith Museum can help somebody become the best person they could possibly be, bingo.